Hello, my name is Professor Jane Snowball, and I'm presenting this research on behalf of an interdisciplinary team that also includes Roberta Communion and Jonathan Ross from King's College London, and Dylan Torrental and Fiona Drummond from Rhodes University. Arts festivals have been one of the sectors most negatively affected by the COVID-19 lockdown in South Africa. In general, live performing arts are particularly vulnerable to disruptions because they rely on in-person production and consumption. They have high proportions of people employed on short-term contracts or informally, and are often small and micro enterprises with limited financial resources themselves. Unlike some cultural sector institutions, festivals often have a small permanent management staff and spend only a minority of their budget on infrastructure like offices and buildings. This means that when they do receive funding, most of the money is channeled to the creatives themselves. This is why we chose festivals as our point of study. The first thing that we did was to record what had happened to festivals in South Africa during the COVID period. Of the 230 festivals that took place in 2019, only 122 were held in 2020, and a good proportion of those happened before the lockdown. Only 95 of the festivals we found in 2019 happened in 2021, which shows the sort of ongoing devastating impact of the pandemic. Future Festivals South Africa, Possibilities for the Age of COVID-19, is an international research collaboration which aimed at mapping the impact of COVID-19 on cultural festivals in South Africa, but also to build networks and to develop some tools that would help them to be more resilient. We worked with a whole group of festival partners. The funding for the research was provided by the Arts and Humanities Research Council UK, and also supported by the South African Cultural Observatory. Shown here are our 7 main festival partners, although we interacted with others as well. Some of them are large established festivals like the National Arts Festival and the Klein Karoo Nasionale Kunstefees. Some happen in small rural areas like the My Body, My Space Festival, and others are in metros like the St. Oosterfees and Buyele Kaya. They covered a range of different kinds of adaptations, some of which I'll talk about now, and also different options for audiences to access their content. I'll start off by talking about the adaptations or innovations of a small festival called My Body, My Space, which happens in a rural area in Mpumalanga. The festival is aimed at a kind of development youth festival, which tries to disrupt the usual spaces in the town in which it happens. It's run by a non-profit organization that also does some other arts and culture development work. My Body, My Space wanted to go online, as you can see from this quote, but given the fact that their audience and their mission was really about reaching rural people and youth, and sometimes people who didn't have access to the internet or high-speed internet connections, they decided on a very innovative move, which was to go onto WhatsApp. So the whole festival was delivered via WhatsApp. You can see the advertisement there. And then the content came to your phone in sort of 2 or 3 minute shows or performances. As you can see from the quote, they were trying to take the important parts of the live festival or the ethos of the live festival, their values, into the online space. And this is something that we saw in other festivals as well, that although we're moving to a new medium, you wanted to take your unique purpose of your festival with you. Like many festivals that moved online successfully, one of the benefits was that they grew the size of their audience in some cases, but certainly audience dispersal. So what you can see from this picture here is that the audiences were still mainly in South Africa, but content was also accessed from many other places in the world. Vuyele Kaya happens in Buffalo City around Christmas time every year. And their reason is to sort of celebrate the Eastern Cape and to welcome people who are returning from other metros back to the Eastern Cape for family Christmas time. And so for them, it was really important to maintain somehow their link with the Eastern Cape. Their adaptation was to move online to a TV broadcast. And they did that because they felt that their traditional audiences were not really active online and wouldn't be able to access their content online. And so they worked with a tourism department in Buffalo City to incorporate visuals and music and commentary that showed the Eastern Cape, that still brought the Eastern Cape into their festival. They massively increased their audience coverage. So they went from having sort of, 10 or 20,000 people to having 400,000 people who watched the television broadcast. And so for that reason, they're thinking of continuing with this into the future in some way. There were also festivals who went completely online. And two of the largest that we were tracking are two of the oldest festivals in South Africa, the National Arts Festival and the Klein Karoo Nasionale Kunstefees. And both of them also said that they wanted to bring the unique local feeling of their festivals into the online space. And the way that they did it was sort of quite different in the two cases. So in the case of the National Arts Festival, this is a winter festival. It's about the shows. It's really the live festival has a lot of choice. And so in terms of the online platform, they tried to keep that. So the focus was on the artistic content, on the fringe and the curated content, and there being a lot of choice and people really focusing on that part of things. The Klein Karoo Nasionale Kunstefees is slightly different. It happens around Easter time, so it's warmer. The physical festival has a lot of outdoor activities and kind of free community activities in the center of the town. And so when they shifted online, they paid more attention to user experience and created these kind of 3D virtual worlds, like the virtual gallery, where you can kind of move around. It's interactive, so each individual can almost walk through the gallery looking at the art. So it was a much more kind of immersive, experiential thing than the National Arts Festival, which was much more about experiencing the shows. So with new formats and innovations comes the requirement for new business models. The quote down below is from an interview related to the Cultural Observatory work, but still with festival managers. This is for anybody who thinks a fortune will be made online. No, the earnings were about a third of the revenue that was normally generated on live festivals. Making much money through ticket sales is not likely. There's so much free online content with which to compete. And this, I think, was a problem that many of the festivals who shifted online very quickly found. So how do you monetize your content? So you might be producing something that's unique, that's very high quality, but you're still in a totally different kind of competitive space. And there are different models of doing this. So this could be through ticketed for individual shows. It could be through some freemiums, so they're free shows, and then some content that you pay for. It could be through a subscription, for example, to the festival itself, or to related news organizations that would also give you access to content. And so this is something that I think is still developing. So there needs to be some thought in that. The other thing, of course, that becomes a problem is how do you protect your intellectual property? So as much as you want to get your content out there and you want people to participate, to look at it, to watch it, you also want to make sure that you are able to hang on to it. And this is something that is going to need quite some thought and development. One of the main things that came out for us was the importance of collaborations and partnerships between audiences, between organizers, between artistic producers, and between sponsors. So what we're seeing, I think, during the COVID time was that festivals were moving out of their traditional kind of gatekeeper model, where they put together a kind of curated program from works they had selected, and shifting much more into a kind of a co-creation model. It doesn't work for everyone. So that was the other learning that came out of this, was that sometimes moving purely online is actually not a good strategy. It depends on the resources that you have. It depends on your background. It also depends on your audience. And this means that the smaller community-based festivals didn't manage very well and often didn't try again in 2021, but we hope that they'll come back as important in-person events this year. For festivals that did move online, there was suddenly a whole range of interesting new data that was available that could help to guide them to have an effective online offering. For example, we used Google Analytics to analyze some of the National Arts Festival patterns in terms of who was accessing content, of course, what content, and when. And this can be really important for programming decisions for the future. So, for example, the pie graph down below shows that 34% of people access the site directly, but another third accessed it through social media or recommendations. So that means that having a good social media presence is kind of really going to be vital in the future. We could also see on which days of the week people were most likely to access festival content or to visit the site and interact with it. A bit of a surprise for me there. Thursday is obviously a good one. And we can even tell when visitors are most likely to access the site in a 24-hour period. So not surprisingly, we can see that interaction peaks at around 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night and then drops off quite steeply. So festivals could use this kind of information to think about when to program, for example, live streaming events, right? So that would allow them to use the site more effectively as a platform for sharing content. We also engaged in futuring research, or something called Letters from the Future. Again, this is the example from the National Arts Festival, but we did programs like this with a whole lot of our partners. So this was the brief. Imagine that it is now the year 2030 and you've just attended the National Arts Festival. Please tell us your experience, what your experience of the festival was like. Be inspired, create your own response in any format that you prefer. And then 2 artists created this kind of online interactive 3D collage based on some of the input that they got from those letters. With another partner, the Futuring project was linked to a song competition, and with another one, it was linked to a kind of community notice board. So what the Futuring project does is that it allows people to step away from the sort of immediate pressure of the moment, and to sort of almost reflect back from the future about what innovations they would like to see, what they really enjoyed, what maybe was retained in Festival 2030, and what was let go. And some of the festival management teams said they found it quite sort of freeing, because it allowed them to kind of step back and take a slightly more strategic approach to what was important going forward. So festival organizers moving beyond being curators and gatekeepers was really interesting. And they did this in a whole number of ways. Firstly, rather than just selecting artworks, they engaged in all kinds of discussions with creative producers to see what would be the best way to achieve an artistic vision in the new format. They also provided facilities for filming pre-recorded and live content, not only in their own towns, but all over South Africa. They provided skills training and advice for shift to online delivery through things like online workshops. You can see one of the adverts below. And they worked much more closely with sponsors to sort of determine what is it that the sponsor was looking for in terms of their value proposition. Okay, so our model in thinking about this is to say, well, festival management teams sort of sit at the center of all these different groups and connect them up in important ways. So festival management teams are linked to artistic producers, to audiences, to technical and support crews who became even more central in the shift to online, and to government sponsors and to private investors. But what we discovered as we worked with more festival teams is that they also connected to other festivals, right? So in some cases, they were sort of acting as linkages more than they were before, and also connected previously disconnected festivals to each other. The other thing they did was to become more active in sort of policy and governance, simply because there were these vocal arts proponents who could speak on behalf of all these different groups to try to get support for this industry. And because of that, they then became much more embedded into the broader artistic community. So we think what we saw was really a shift in the kinds of roles that festival management teams played during this period. I won't spend long on this, but just to say that this is an extract from the Creative Industries Master Plan draft document, which is part of the reimagined industrial policy strategy for South Africa. And the thinking in this plan is very much reflecting what we've been seeing in the case of festivals, which is that to understand the creative industries and what they need and how they operate, it's not only about the supply side, the creatives and the creative skills, or the demand side, reaching audiences and developing audiences and markets, but also crucially about market efficiency. So this is where institutions like festival management teams are playing such an important role. It also needs to be linked to things like ICT infrastructure, which was a constraint, and protecting intellectual property. So to conclude, festivals and creatives are resilient and innovative, but they have been quite hard hit by COVID-19 and they need support. Because of their unique position, supporting festivals, especially non-profits, has an impact on many parts of the creative economy, and they're very good at it because they understand all of these complex networks and relationships. The danger is that emerging creatives, so those who are just starting off in their career and don't have established networks, as well as smaller community festivals, might exit the sector forever. For larger events, hybrid is probably here to stay, meaning that issues of IP, business model adaptation, and innovative ways of reaching across the digital divide will become more important. Thank you for listening. Please have a look at our website for more.